they were running, drug distribution networks, from here all the way to, to Spain, many places of Europe, Australia, um, and they were the money makers. Back then, when my first deals with Mencho, believe it or not, it was because we were arrested by the Mexican government, and he was sent to rescue us. He showed up himself with 60, 70 armed cartel members, and law enforcement in Mexico, the government officials feared him because he was a violent man. They were running, drug distribution networks, from here all the way to, to Spain, many places of Europe, Australia, um, and they were the money makers. Back then, when my first deals with Mencho, believe it or not, it was because we were arrested by the Mexican government, and he was sent to rescue us. He showed up himself with 60, 70 armed cartel members, and law enforcement in Mexico, the government officials feared him because he was a violent man.
I've heard it, and I would love the confirmation from you. I've heard that El Mencho might have faked his death. Is this correct? I don't know why I'm so confused on this.
I think there's been like conflicting reports saying that he has passed, and some reports say that he hasn't. I mean, from what I know, I believe that he's still alive. I think that those conflicted reports are just, because he's been suffering from some sickness, and when the government doesn't hear about him or something, they could believe that he has passed. And just me understanding that world, I do believe that if he would have passed, his son probably would have cooperated and tried to save his own ass. And the fact that he didn't tells me that he's still protecting his father. Yeah, so there's many conflicted reports on that he could be sick, or he's dead, or he's still alive. But everything tells me that he's still alive.
I want to jump to something real quick. Something that we had an interview recently,
Mm-hmm.
and the big part of this, we haven't released that interview yet because we're still
Okay.
we're building that interview into something bigger.
Okay.
And the big part of that interview was money laundering. And, you as someone who lived in the United States, who, was, you were pushing a lot of weight and there was a lot of money coming through your area. How prevalent is money laundering, which I know it is in the cartel and drug space, but in your experience, what are some of the money laundering schemes that you notice, but as well as, there's so much money. I imagine there's banks that there's one bank that I saw in a small town went from one bank to like 20 banks within a few years because it seemed like the money they were getting from money laundering, it was partnering with cartel and whatnot. And so could you enlighten us on a little bit of that?
Well, in terms of money laundering, so there's different types. What you hear a lot about is banks and wire transfers, or ways to, drug lords or drug trafficking organizations to hide their money, and this is a little bit confusing at times to someone who doesn't understand it. But what I believe should be the issue, right, is that a lot of these conversations that we have about banks and where these drug lords have their money, what they actually do to launder it, I think there's a confusion, because to me and my organization that handle literally billions of dollars worth of drugs, there's no way to launder that type of money. I was one of many drug trafficking organizations, and all that money goes back into the business, and money is laundered. If I was laundering money for myself, you know, for me to actually, use my profits and put money and make it legitimate so I could reinvest it, that was very small compared to the large amounts of money that's actually being handled. Um, right. And I, I believe that the story sounds good when people are believing that, someone goes to a bank in the United States and, pulls up with a truckload full of money and gives it to the bank. Um, I, Most of those transactions are going to be done more as a personal. like for a personal kind of gain. If we see the reports of Mencho's wife being like money launderer for the cartel, and what I see is that she's being a money launderer for her, for the profits that they're receiving, for the profits that they're gaining, and how they want to legitimate, and make themselves legal. But there's different means. You see the trading system between China and drug traffickers in Mexico, where the money doesn't move. They basically need to pay for precursors in China. Um, the Mexican drug cartel will receive money in different cities in the United States, and instead of going through a wire transfer, they'll just have Chinese citizens give them, the money in China, and they'll give them the money here in the U.S. And I believe that that's why you see so many migrants being from China. That opened the door for them to take their money out of China because it's illegal. They can't take out more than $50,000 at a time, or $50,000 um, from their bank account. Now it gives them an opportunity to come, to the United States and have that money if they sell some of their assets, or launder the money that way. So there's different schemes. For sure, it's either um, used by shell corporations for a larger fee, to be able to transfer it to Colombia and put it in their system, or they'll find a banker in Spain, and the percentages are real high. There's so much money to be made that they'll take the risk. From Spain, a money transfer, if you're going to pay for someone to launder money and get you the money back into Mexico, just say you're going to pay 12 to 16%. And we're talking about, millions of dollars. Um, any legitimate banker or banking system or company would jump to that, for the opportunity to be able to make money off of that.
How did you do it? If you made millions, did you just keep your money in the bank and didn't expect them to worry about it? Did they not worry about it? Was it not enough to kind of create a scene?
Not only did, I'm gonna tell you how I did it. I'm I'm gonna explain how most of those drug traffickers that I work with did it. We didn't. We rather have cash money than anything else because we know the United States government is going to come take everything. The dollar is what's most important, especially when you're talking about drug trafficking. When you're working at that level, you basically need every dollar to be responsible for the amount of drugs that you're moving. There's a lot of money that we actually just kept it in the business, and when we needed money, we'd put it out, and the way we'd save it would be how every other drug trafficker saves it. You dig it up somewhere. Some people have just bigger hiding spots. There might be containers, in Mexico, in ranches full of, nothing but $100 bills, and they just continue to put the money back into the business, reinvest it. It takes money to have sicarios and buy weapons and vehicles. Um, so it works a little bit like that.
Have you heard in recent years them using anything like the new, cryptocurrencies?
The way it works is that it works with a bunch of like subcontractors, and I know that there's networks that are using cryptocurrency, especially when it comes to um, web. When they use the web to sell drugs, and smaller, real, independent, smaller drug trafficking organizations. That's how they're moving the money around. But when it comes to major drug trafficking, and we're dealing with the cartels, like you can't go and take a cryptocurrency on a hard drive and pay a drug lord with it, or pay a politician with it. If that makes sense. They want the cash. They don't want any possibility of paper trails. And somehow, some way, you'd have to, just say if you had 30, $40 million in a hard drive, then you have to worry about um, getting the money back in dollars because everyone wants to get paid. You're gonna have, the person that jumps the drugs across the border, smuggles the drugs across the border. He takes a percentage. The transportation person takes a percentage, and so on. So it's a lot of splitting up the money that a hard drive and cryptocurrency wouldn't make sense to in that large scale. And I'm talking about what I know: major, large drug trafficking, distribution, and hundreds of millions of dollars, or not billions.